where we started with emergency arbitration for first 2 days, and we will be discussing about the online dispute resolution, virtual hearing today, and artificial intelligence tomorrow. I'm grateful to Rajiv Gandhi National Law University and all the participants for coming and listening to this webinar today. I'll be making a presentation, and I'll just start the presentation share the presentation with you. So today's topic is virtual hearings in arbitration. I just wanted to share with you that my views are personal and these discussions are only for general information purpose, and it is not to be treated as a legal advice. And if any legal advice is necessary, then you can reach out to me or the organizers. So today's outline would be, first we will start with the introduction, then provisions under the rules of various arbitral institutions for virtual hearings, and where there are various reports and protocols which have come about in recent past. ICC protocol on virtual hearing is the latest, and we will look into it in slight detail. Thereafter, we will also discuss about the cross-examination of witnesses as to how can we conduct a cross-examination of witnesses through virtual hearing. And apart from that, we would also discuss about the virtual hearing consideration from Indian perspective and the role of Indian arbitral institutions. And lastly, we will talk about augmented reality, virtual reality, and graphical representation of evidence by way of virtual hearing. So to begin with the introduction, as we all know, due to this COVID situation, the virtual hearings have become a necessity. Earlier, we have done number of arbitrations where we have taken the help of technology to conduct the arbitrations. But of late, we have been compelled to make the arbitration proceedings completely virtual. And that is where we have seen that technology has been helping in conducting the arbitrations in a most efficient way. In a way, it's a blessings in disguise, is that we have understood the value of technology, and always arbitration had the benefit of party autonomy. So the party could decide the procedural rules, they could decide how to conduct the arbitrations by deciding the deadline for each stage of arbitration. They can also decide the schedule of hearings and venue and place for the hearing, or mode of hearing, whether to have a physical hearing or virtual hearing. Apart from that, the parties have also has the liberty to take any measures in order to diminish any risk. So today now we have this health risk. I think the virtual hearing could be one of the best modes to not disrupt the arbitration process and continue with the whole process of arbitration. So we will discuss in detail what all it takes to conduct the virtual hearings and how best we can make use of the technology. Of course, there are downsides of that. We will examine that as well, because nothing is perfect in this world. So if there is a benefit, there could be a risk, and how to mitigate those risks, again, we would discuss. As I said, the technology, video conferencing, and virtual hearings is nothing new to the arbitration world. In international commercial arbitration, we have used in past very widely the use of technology. What we used to do is that if there are a number of witnesses which are there, we used to at least hold cross-examination through video conferencing for some of the witnesses. Or if the parties are in different locations, we have successfully done number of arbitrations where the arbitrators and the counsels are at different locations. As far as the virtual hearings are concerned, in last few months, we have seen a tremendous increase in use of technology for the virtual hearings. And various platforms are used. For example, we are using Zoom now for this webinar. There are other technologies called Microsoft Teams, Cisco's WebEx, BlueJeans, and there are many other technological solutions. Of course, there are some challenges with those platforms, is that you need to have a uniformity of the platform. The users should be comfortable with using it, including the arbitrators, counsels, parties, because the witness may not be at the same locations where the parties' counsels are. So depending on the agreement between the parties, there are various options available, and parties can choose whichever option is most convenient for them. Now, if you talk about type of virtual hearings, there are two kinds which we have seen. One is fully remote, which we are doing now, is that we don't have anybody at any particular venue. All the parties are situated at different locations. None of the parties are at one particular place, on all the three arbitrators or the sole arbitrator, as the case may be, are not at the same venue. Semi-remote is a kind of a hearing where you have some parties having the hearing at the physical location and the remaining parties are virtual. So that is the difference between fully remote and semi-remote. We have been doing semi-remote for a number of years now. Fully remote we have done a few, but now we are doing more and more fully remote. Of course, when we started with the lockdown and all the arbitration hearings got adjourned. Even Supreme Court has come up with an order saying that all the limitation in the arbitration would stand extended during the lockdown period, which is a great advantage. But we cannot hold the arbitrations hearings beyond a point due to this, because as we all can see, this pandemic is here to stay for some time before we get rid of it completely. And therefore, I feel that we should continue with the arbitration hearing through this technological mode. And of course, it has a tremendous advantage even after the pandemic, because if you have got familiarized and comfortable with this particular mode of hearing or conducting the arbitration, then maybe we can continue doing it even after when we can have the physical hearings as well. So that is something the time will tell us, but we'll today examine what are the advantages and disadvantages of virtual hearings. If we talk about the past, the Queen Mary and Whiten case conducted an international arbitration survey in 2018. And one of the questions they asked is that, how often have you used the information technology in international arbitration? So if you can see on your screen the answers which they have analyzed in terms of percentage, maximum people said video conferencing, like 43% said video conferencing frequently and 17% said always. Hearing room technologies, which we will discuss slightly detailed later, is multimedia presentations, real-time electronic transcript. Again, there was an equal divide between frequently and always of 38 and 35%. Cloud-based storage is also a very important tool. For example, FTP side data rooms for parties to access and share the data. That also, many of us are already using it. The only issue which comes up with artificial intelligence and virtual hearing rooms, that is something we will discuss in detail tomorrow. But some of the results, if you see, 53% and 64%, they have never used artificial intelligence in virtual hearings. So these are the things for future, or if I can say immediate future, where we would be using artificial intelligence and virtual hearing rooms. But we can see from the answers which they have given, there are a number of people who are at least aware and have used at least once or twice when it comes to this technological advancements are concerned. Now we will discuss various rules of the arbitral institutions, because we have two kinds of arbitrations, ad hoc and institutional. And in the institutional arbitration, of course, ad hoc parties can decide their own procedure. We are doing number of ad hoc arbitration now with the virtual hearing facilities, where the arbitrators have themselves passed orders asking the parties to agree for virtual hearings. When we talk about arbitral institutions, number of arbitral institutions have provisions in their own rules providing virtual hearings. For example, if you see ICC rules, it explicitly permit the use of video conferencing and virtual hearings for the case management conferences. These are the first conferences, as we say, the first preliminary hearing, which is held by the tribunal when the parties appoint the tribunal. So there, ICC rule encourage video conferencing and virtual hearings. Emergency arbitration, yesterday you heard about that. There also you can have the virtual hearings and hearings in expedited procedure. So where the value of the claim is not significant, then parties can agree for an expedited procedure where it is only document only arbitration, where again you can have the video conferencing. ICC Rule 22 and 26 also provide that the tribunal shall be in full charge of the hearings and permit the tribunal to adopt such procedural measures as it considers appropriate, which gives a very wide power to the tribunal to determine its procedure. Now the question comes is that can the tribunal force parties to agree for a virtual hearing? And we face that situation in real life where we requested the tribunal because the witness who was working with our client had left the client and was working in another country, Middle East country, where he was not able to travel. And this was pre-COVID, where we faced this situation, where we made an application for cross-examination for through video conference, and claimant refused, saying that we don't agree with that. And tribunal said that, look, video conferencing is always a tool which can be used, but you can't force parties to agree for video conference. And that is something, personally speaking, I don't agree, because if the tribunal has full control of to manage the hearing, and so long as the parties are treated equally and full opportunity to present the case is given, there should not be any problem in allowing the application for video conferencing, even if one party objects to that. Now coming to LCIA rules, LCIA rules also rule 19.2 specifically envisage any type of hearing to be proceeded by video conferencing. So that is something it's very important that the LCIA rules provide for video conferencing specifically. If you talk of other rules, SIAC rules, Stockholm Arbitration rules, or HKIC rules, they do not have explicit mention about the use of virtual hearings or video conference. But the rules, as I pointed out in ICC rules, they grant tribunals with authority over the conduct of proceedings so long as they are fair, expeditious, and effective. So obviously the tribunal has to take these three factors into consideration by giving the parties the ability to present their case to the fullest. So these are the rules which again gives power to the tribunal to determine the procedure, including the video conferencing. Now, if we talk about various reports and protocols which have come about in light of this pandemic, or even prior to that, they talk about the video conferencing and virtual hearings, which is very important tool for reduction of cost and time, because you don't have to travel to the various locations where the seat of arbitration is. Of course, seat will continue to be the same as parties have agreed, because seat is a juridical concept. But at the same time, there are few institutions who have come up with a guidance note or protocols to support the rules. For example, Korean Commercial Arbitration Board's protocol on video conferencing provide the use of video conferencing in arbitral proceeding in a very detailed manner. What it does is it discusses the best practices for organizing, testing, and performing video conferencing, and also practical guidance for users of international arbitrations to consider. So if you have a look at this protocol, this will give us a step-by-step process for conducting video conferencing. Again, ICC Commission on Report of Information on Use of Information Technology in International Arbitration. Again, this was almost 2 years back. But Article 3 addresses the concerns about the confidentiality, data integrity, and the transmission and organization of data to ensure that the data does not become compromised at any stage. Later part of this presentation, we will be discussing about how to protect the confidentiality and data protection through virtual hearings, because that is the biggest concern against having the hearing through virtual mode. So that is where we will discuss about how to protect the interest of both the parties to maintain confidentiality and protect their data being used or rather misused for any other purpose other than the arbitration. Chartered Institute of Arbitrator has come up with the guidelines for witness conferencing in international arbitration last year. These guidelines are not for video conferencing, but it talks about how to have a witness conferencing. For example, if there are two witnesses, there is a concept called hot tubbing, where both witnesses are cross-examined or examined at the same time, and which makes things easier for tribunal to understand where the parties are trying to lead evidence which is contrary to each other. So if you are having both the witnesses together in the witness box, it becomes very easy to ask them the questions which the other person can refute, and the tribunals can see who is more accurate than the other. And that's the fact-finding exercise the tribunal has to conduct. Now, if you do it through video conferencing, those things become a bit challenging because you don't have the witness next to each other. Of course, you can see both witnesses on the screen, but Article 10 of CIR guidelines say that the dynamics and ease of communication of witness giving evidence side by side are likely to be adversely altered when they are physically dislocated. So if you are having people who are not at the same physical location, it becomes very difficult for them to give the evidence, because the effect of conversation gets lost while doing it. Like if this would have been a real conference or a seminar, we can see each other and see the reactions, but there are limitations in video conferencing or the virtual presentation, where you don't get the same feel of the other side who is listening to you. So that is where the challenges are there, because in arbitration, especially, we will discuss about witness cross-examination, where you have to see the demeanor of the witness, or whether the witness has understood the question. And those are the things which are challenging, but we are getting used to it. ICC note on mitigating the effects of COVID-19 pandemic is the latest addition into these reports and protocols, where the ICC has come up with a detailed guidelines for the parties, councils, and tribunal to conduct the video conference in a most efficient way. And now let's discuss those rules in slight detail, because those are the most practical aspects of the arbitration, which they have dealt with in a very, very short note, which is very helpful. So if we see the ICC protocol on virtual hearings, so it gives a complete set of protocol on virtual hearings. So it starts with pre-hearing plan, the scope and logistics, and we have used it in last few weeks very effectively in number of arbitrations which we are conducting, is to decide how we should start, how we should conduct, and what are the mode in which we can conduct the virtual hearings. Now, if we talk about pre-hearing plan, the first thing is to identify which issues are essential to be on the hearing agenda, which can be dealt with on documents only. So with this, we can also see that the another advantage which comes in is mostly on reliance on documents and written advocacy. So we have seen that that has helped a lot by allowing the parties to make out their case either by way of skeletal arguments before the hearing, and even post-hearing memorials can be a great tool to communicate with the tribunal rather than oral advocacy. Because in India, we have seen mostly parties rely on oral arguments and less rely on the written arguments. And that's a stark difference with the international arbitration seated outside India, where we have seen that you are very much arguing all your case in writing before even the oral hearing starts. So you give the complete skeletal of your arguments in advance so that the tribunal and the other side is fully prepared, and you can save a lot of time as there are no surprises because the tribunal will exactly know what you are going to argue. And something which the tribunal can decide only on the basis of the documents, we can reduce the length of the hearing, oral hearing, and also video conferencing can be used only for the essential arguments which are necessary to be made orally. So that is the advantage also of the virtual hearing, is that we can reduce the length of the hearing, which in physical hearing we sometimes we go on and on, even in asking questions to the witnesses all or in the oral arguments. Because we have seen in virtual hearings we have to give the arguments in advance in writing, or at least the documents which we are going to rely upon to the tribunal. The next aspect is agreeing on number of participants and list of the participants. For example, who all will be assisting the arbitrators, the party representatives, counsel team, because both sides would have counsels. They can have senior counsels and the people assisting senior counsel, witnesses, experts, administrative secretaries, interpreters, stenographers, transcribers and technicians. So when it becomes a virtual hearing, there is no bar on number of people who can attend. And that is another challenge, is that it has to be managed in a proper way, because every side may have at least 5 to 6 people. And if there are 7 or 8 things, then it becomes like a big hearing, where in physical hearing you would not have around 10 people, whereas in virtual you can have maybe more than 50 people who can be part of this. We just conducted one SIAC hearing where even SIAC representative was present. Normally, the arbitral institution doesn't participate in the hearing, but in the virtual hearing, just to see how it is going, they sought the permission, and it was granted by the tribunal. So number of people who are attending is must, because it has to be pre-agreed, and the invite should be sent to only those people. And if there are any more people, they should be not allowed to attend the hearing. As regards the recording of the hearing also is a real concern, because it could be misused by the parties later on if all these technologies have the recording facilities, and it should not be allowed, because there are multiple devices which could be there for recording of the hearing proceedings. There is another tool which is very important. It's called virtual rooms, where the arbitrators or each side can discuss among themselves. So there are breakout rooms which we can have through these technological platforms, where when you want to talk to your colleagues or arbitrators want to talk to each other, they can do the discussions in private, not in front of everybody. So they have the virtual rooms which can be then used for discussion amongst themselves. Identification of each individual who are not on video and only listening mode is also very important at the start of video conference, because there are people who may not just be listening and not participating in the hearing, but their presence needs to be recorded at the beginning of the hearing, and they should disclose what is their role and who they are representing. As regards the technical issues, specifications, requirements, and support staff is concerned, there should be discussion between the parties, and they should come up with the agreed plan for which platform they want to use, because sometimes the license to the platform or the availability of platform is also a challenge with some of the arbitrators, and that's where the discussion is ongoing, is that whether the institutions themselves should provide the physical platform or the technology to conduct the hearings, rather than allowing parties to use the third-party service providers, where the security could be a concern, because no matter what we do, there are terms and conditions which are widely drafted by these technological platforms, which can also allow them to access the information which are being shared on their platform. So as far as the arbitral institutions are concerned, they are considering it. SIAC is actively considering it in the Maxwell Chambers suites. They are trying to develop a technology where it can be given to the parties who are using the SIAC facilities for conducting the arbitration. The second thing which is very important is the minimum system specification. So bandwidth, for example, requirement of clear connectivity, video availability, camera, and lighting, because it really depends on where the hearing is being conducted from the individual location. And if the lighting is not adequate, or the distance between the microphone and the person is not adequate, then the hearing can really be affected, and it unnecessarily takes time, and the momentum gets lost in the process. Now, if there are certain equipments which are required, for example, phone, backup computers, connectivity boosters, extenders, or power backup, those should be provided in advance, so that the hearing, which is a fixed date hearing, is not hampered for a lack of such technological equipments. So all the things which are required should be planned in advance. This is very important, because ultimately the parties would have to arrange for that, and they should be available with the parties when the hearing starts. Other technical issues is checking the compatibility of the selected platform to be used. Everybody should have the same platform downloaded on their equipments so that they are able to use it effectively. And if there are any training or a tutorial which is necessary for people to use this technology. So some of the arbitrators who are former judges were not familiar with using of this technology. So what we did is that just before the hearing, previous day, we sent one of our members of the team to just go and explain them in person or on phone how to use the equipments or how to log in and what are the credentials which are required for using these equipments. Always it's good plan to have plan B for a contingency measures in case of sudden technical snag or failure or disconnection. We always have had a situation where you have at least a phone connection so that the person can be connected through audio if the video is not working, or the internet bandwidth should be tested in advance so that there is no technological disruptions. Conducting a mock or trial sessions prior to the hearing is always advisable, because that would give the confidence to parties with regard to testing of the connectivity and the streaming of the hearing. Online etiquette and due process considerations. So these are the two things which are very important. What we have seen in physical hearing is that two parties can speak together, or there could be a heated exchange between the two parties, which becomes very difficult on online things. So in a way, it's a good thing that one party speaks at one time and waits for the other party waits for the first party to conclude before they speak. But it's always good to have the etiquette, which is always identified in advance. For example, identifying the lead speaker. So we know that who is going to lead the argument from each side. There should not be interruption, because there are platforms when two parties are speaking at the same time, only voice of one party is captured, and that is the real challenge for the transcribers, because if you have a live transcript, they are not able to identify who is speaking and whether that person's uh, comments or objections should be recorded. So it's always better to speak in a sequential manner rather than simultaneously. Uh, as far as the uh, reasonable and responsible use of platform and bandwidth is concerned, there should not be people who are not required, should not be joining the hearing, so that the bandwidth is unnecessarily used, or at least there is no lack of confidentiality in those circumstances. Uh, there should not be multiple gadgets being used, or there should not be people who are not connected with the matter present in the room, because that could also disturb the quality of the transmission and connectivity, because there could be many other equipments which can be used at the same time, and that can interfere with the whole process of the arbitration. Now, if we talk about other online etiquette, uh, written statements from the parties and counsel should be taken in advance, that they have tested the platform and technology and they are adequate as tested by the parties. So this will save the arbitrators from allegation that the parties were not being able to present the case because the technological difficulties. So it is always good to take undertaking before and after the hearing, so that this kind of objections of due process are not taken by the parties after the award for challenging the award. Uh, as far as the agreement is concerned, the parties should agree in writing before that they are fine to go ahead with the virtual hearing, because ultimately that is, as I said earlier, if there is no agreement between the parties, then tribunal cannot impose the virtual hearing without any reason, because in our case, as I discussed, the parties had no ability to bring the witness from abroad for various reasons, and therefore virtual hearing was necessary. But if it is possible and the parties are objecting, then the tribunal cannot force them. But parties' agreement is very important for the tribunal to proceed with the virtual hearing. It is also parties' duty to cooperate on technical matters prior to and during the virtual hearing, so that once they agree to the virtual hearing, they should fully cooperate with each other and not create unnecessary hurdles during the hearing. Now, when we talk of hurdles, cross-examination comes to the mind, because ultimately oral hearing is easy, but cross-examination, you have witnesses, you have the people who are transcribing the whole process. In India, what we normally use for cross-examination is a screen and a person who is typing the questions and answers. Whereas outside India, what we use and we should start using more frequently in India is that there is a live transcript. So whatever is spoken by any member of the tribunal or the counsel or the witness is recorded live, and every word is recorded in writing. So that's the difference. So now if we conduct the Indian style cross-examination on a virtual platform, it becomes very difficult, because you are not having a screen in front of you, or you are not having a person who is typing the questions and answers. Apart from that, it will also help to reduce the cost of transcription, because the transcriber may not be in India. It could be in any other jurisdiction, and still can provide the transcription service. So if you talk about the cross-examination in virtual hearing, what is most important is identification of whether counsel would be using multi-screen for presentation of evidence, because most of the time we see that the witness is confronted with the document, or the questions are asked based on a particular document. So it becomes important for witness to see the document either in a physical form or in electronic form. And if there is an electronic form, it is very important that the camera is not taken off the witness while the witness is looking at the document. So it is important to have two screens. On one screen you can see the parties, and on the other screen you can see the document. So that is one aspect which has to be planned in advance, because we have seen situations where either you have to confront the witness with the document, or you want to refer to a particular documents. It becomes difficult for tribunal as well as the witness if they are not having the physical set of documents. Agreement on modalities of submitting and showing the demonstrative exhibits is also very important. So if you're going to make any presentation or showing any evidence on screen, it should be shared in advance, and there should be an agreement between the parties that they are going to be shown this, because there is a concept called ambush in arbitration, is that you can't take other side by surprise by showing something which is otherwise not planned, and that something is very important for the due process in arbitration, or fair process for giving equal opportunity to the parties. Consultation between tribunal and parties is very, very important for transcription, use of typing stenographers and interpreters. We have seen that for the witnesses who are not conversant with the language of the arbitration, mostly we conduct arbitrations in English, but we have seen Korean and Japanese witnesses who are not very comfortable, or even if they know the language, they are not fluent in the English, and that's the challenge we face while cross-examining them or presenting them as our own witness for cross-examination by the other side. And that is where the use of interpreters becomes very important. Now with the advancement of technology, we have so many softwares, or we can have the interpreters online who can do the real-time interpretation and save time and cost. But yes, of course, there should be discussion and a procedural order passed by the tribunal in prior to the hearing. And it's always good to have a procedural hearing prior to the main evidentiary or oral hearing, so that all these technological and procedural aspects can be ironed out. And ultimately, that would also show that the tribunal had given enough opportunities to parties to come up with the objection with regard to any particular aspect of the arbitration. And then after consultation with the parties and the tribunal only, the decision was taken by the tribunal. Now, if we talk about consultation, the consultation should also be there between the parties with regard to order of calling and examination of witness. In physical world, it is very easy because you can bring everybody to the venue of the hearing, and they can wait in a separate room by the time their turn comes. The same situation would arise even in the online world, where the person should be available to join as soon as their turn comes. And therefore, the sequence becomes very important, that it should be disclosed in advance so that the witnesses are available as and when they are called for their testimony. The connection and time duration is also very important, that as and when witness is required, the witness is available and has the proper connection to connect for the duration which is necessary for the whole process. As far as the permission is required, between the witness and the parties counsel to talk, there should be a separate chat room, but it is not encouraged to have the witnesses talking to the parties or the counsels, but without the permission of the tribunal. Interaction between the examiner and the witness on an online environment sometimes becomes challenging, but we have seen also a number of times that there is no difficulty. We have conducted the full day hearings, but mostly there is no difficulty in conducting those hearings online. As far as the tribunal's role is concerned, they have to be closely watching the conduct of the witness and also ensure that the documents which are being shown to the witness by the parties, if there are any person other than the witness who is present in the room, uh, everything should be disclosed to the tribunal and all the parties involved, because the efficacy and efficiency or sanctity of the proceedings are paramount. Now, when we talk of Indian context, what has happened is that with this COVID situation, we have now started moving for the virtual hearings. And ultimately, it is for the tribunal in ad hoc arbitration or the arbitral institutions, because most of the arbitral institutions in India and outside India are working despite the lockdown. We have been filing new cases, we have been conducting hearings during this period, and we hope to continue to do so even after this situation arises through virtual mode, because that has presented us with a tremendous benefits which we are all experiencing. So in terms of the Indian context, we always had these timelines for passing of an award. With 2019 amendments, the timeline has been slightly extended. Earlier, it used to start from the date of constitution of the tribunal, but now it starts from the completion of pleadings. And number of matters where the arbitration was ongoing in 2019 amendment came. There is a judgment of Delhi High Court that even for the pending arbitrations, this new timeline of 2019 will apply. So the time for passing of an award is 12 months from the completion of pleadings. Then parties can agree for 6 more months. So that makes it 18 months. So the 18 months from the date of constitution of the tribunal has now been changed to 18 months from completion of pleadings. And normally, as per the act, the pleadings have to be completed within 6 months. So that makes the whole process of 24 months, which is more than sufficient in majority of cases to conclude the arbitration and pass an award. Now, if we keep adjourning the arbitration, irrespective of the extension of time granted by the courts, it would become difficult because the whole process may get delayed. And therefore, virtual hearings are the only mode of continuing with the arbitration where the timelines can be adhered to, and it would make it also easy for parties to resolve their dispute as early as possible. Apart from that, the fast track procedure also helps. So section 29B talks of fast track procedure, which is on document only, and the parties can adopt to that. If there are no oral hearings are required, then the tribunal can be asked to decide the dispute on the basis of the documents. So that helps also to party to resolve their dispute as quickly as possible in the circumstances. Now, we discussed about confidentiality. Now we have a section 42A, which has been introduced by 2019 amendment, where it provides that notwithstanding anything contained in any other law for the time being in force, the arbitrator, the arbitral institutions, and the parties to the arbitration agreement shall maintain confidentiality of all arbitration proceedings except award, where it is disclosure is necessary for purpose of implementation and enforcement of award. So when it says all arbitration proceedings, it includes the virtual hearings, and therefore it is a duty or a statutory duty on parties, arbitrators, and institution to maintain confidentiality. And therefore, it is very important for the use of this technology to ensure that there is a sufficient confidentiality which is maintained. And virtual hearings should not be misused by any of the parties for breaching the confidentiality obligations. And that is something is a virtue of arbitration, where parties select the arbitration over the normal court process, where the arbitration gives a great advantage to the parties for conducting hearings which are confidential, and that saves their ongoing relationship, that saves their confidential nature of their agreement. And ultimately that is where the benefit of arbitration is that. But to bring one more benefit, the other benefit should not be taken away. And that is where we are quite concerned about virtual hearing, and we will talk about the data security as we go along. The other most important obligation on the arbitral tribunal is to conduct the entire arbitration process in a most fair and equal manner, and the treatment to the parties should be equal, and full opportunity should be given to each of the parties to present its case. Section 18 of our Arbitration Act specifically provides that the parties shall be treated with equality, and each party shall be given a full opportunity to present its case. Now, if some party doesn't have the ability to present the case virtually, they can very well take an argument that, look, I didn't have the benefit of the technology, so that I was not given an opportunity to present my case, or I didn't have, I had the technology but I could not use it effectively. Although that is for the tribunal to decide whether it is a genuine excuse, or it is just to delay the whole process. And number of times we have seen that parties have tried to delay, but the tribunal, or a strong tribunal, has been able to prevail over the parties, saying that no, we will go ahead and please arrange to participate in the hearing. Because we have seen that mostly at least one party is interested in delaying the whole process. So to avoid that kind of a situation, we have seen that the tribunals taking a tough stand against the parties, but at the same time, it is an obligation on the tribunal to pass an award which is enforceable. Because if you see the grounds of challenging the award under Section 34 2A Roman 3, it says that the arbitral award may be set aside by the court if the party was not given proper notice of the arbitration proceedings or was otherwise unable to present his case. Now, otherwise unable to present its case is a very wide term, and it can be quoted by the unsuccessful party in the arbitration to say that in violation of Section 18 and in violation of fair processes, the party was not able to present its case through virtual hearing. And that could be a great challenge to an award, because the after whole process is conducted, if the award is set aside, then there is no benefit of conducting the hearing virtually. In addition to that, again, Section 34(2)(a)(5) provides that the arbitral award may be set aside by the court if the arbitral procedure was not in accordance with the agreement of the parties. So if one party agrees to virtual hearing and the other doesn't, then again, the party who is not agreeing, and if the either it is provided under the rules which is agreed by the parties, or in the ad hoc arbitration, if one party doesn't agree for the hearing to be conducted virtually, then that could be also a ground for setting aside of the award. So tribunal has to be very, very careful in conducting the process where both parties are agreeing. And that's where, when we were discussing, we said that the agreement of parties should be in writing for conducting the virtual hearings. If they're not agreeing, that could be a great risk for the award's enforceability, because that could be set aside on the ground which is provided under Section 34. Therefore, to conclude this point, all virtual hearings must ensure fair and equal treatment of the parties and provide reasonable opportunity to the parties to present their case. So this is the fundamental rule for conducting the hearings through video conferencing, because if that is not fair and equal, then the award itself can be set aside on this ground. The award can be very well written. It could be absolutely correct on merits, but for violation of the procedure, the award can still be set aside if the parties have not agreed, or they can prove that they have no ability to present their case. Apart from that, the other concerns are there is that the managing the virtual hearing from the participation of the different time zones. So we recently faced this situation where some of the parties are getting up very early in the morning, and the arbitrator was conducting hearings starting in the evening, going on into late night. And what we decided is to rotate the time so that everybody gets a good time. At least if you have 5-day hearing, then all 5 days the hearing will start at the different times to accommodate everybody on a different time zone. Because otherwise, it was happening that the arbitrator or the parties were continuing with the hearing very late in the night or very early in the morning. So that is again not efficient, and sometimes we have to strike a balance. For example, the arbitrator is from Singapore, the witness is in the US, and the counsel is in India. We just did that kind of an arbitration where the time zone became a bit challenged. But with the cooperation between the parties and with the some kind of push from the arbitrator, and it really depends on the arbitrator how the arbitrator is able to bring the parties together on these small issues, which can become kind of a roadblock in the whole process, because the issues may be small as the time of the hearing, but it can completely stall the hearing. Other logistical and technological specification also should be met, as we discussed, for seamless and efficient hearing. And in order to maintain the integrity of the proceedings, it should be the people who are viewing this should be limited to the witness providing evidence, interpreters, paralegals, and legal representatives. It should not be that any third party is allowed to witness the hearing who has no connection with the arbitration proceeding. So therefore, in a physical room, you can see everybody who is present, and you can ask the role of each person. But in a virtual world, it becomes challenging sometimes to ensure that nobody other than the parties on the persons who are representing the parties are present in the uh, hearing room, virtual hearing room. As far as cybersecurity and hacking is concerned, it's a topic in itself. We will discuss it at the later part of this presentation, because it's a great concern for the arbitration process to have a secure platform and which is not hacked by anyone during the process or after the process, because there could be many confidential information, and once the hacking is happening, then the confidentiality doesn't apply, because person who is hacking into the system technologically is not bound by, for example, section 42A, which talks about only the parties, arbitrators, and the institution to maintain confidentiality. So if there is a breach of security, then it becomes a challenge to prove that what happened to that confidential information, and none of the parties or the tribunal can be held responsible other than the technology which is being used by the parties to conduct the hearing or store their documents securely. So there are protocols, and we will talk about those protocols very shortly. But yes, cybersecurity and hacking can be a great challenge for online arbitration or virtual hearings. The other aspects, which are softer aspects on this issue, is loss of in-person observation of the witness testimony. As I said earlier, it is very important to see the demeanor of the witness or see his behavior while answering a question. And sometimes we insist that the tribunal record that. So to give you an example, I asked the question to a witness more than 3 times, and the witness was avoiding the answer, or it was taking unreasonably long time to think for that. And it becomes very difficult to judge the whole uh, behavior of the witness on screen, because only some portion of the face is visible during the cross-examination. Tomorrow we will talk about the AI and other aspects where we can discuss about how we can have this problems can be taken away. Apart from that, also look and feel of the witness the evidence on screen and tribunal members to discern body language, facial expression, and tonal changes becomes difficult. Of course, with the technologies and the microphones we have, those are not a real concern. But one of the reasons which sometimes we have seen parties quoting is that we are not able to connect with the witness, not in the virtual sense, but in a softer sense where you are not able to feel the behavior of the witness. Witness also is, and this is a genuine concern we have seen, of course we have not seen it happening, but it's a concern, is that the witness is given information which is not captured by the camera. Either it could be a written thing or a different screen where they are able to see the answers, which cannot be captured. So if the camera in the other screen is kept in the same position, then witness can even look at the camera and can see the other screen which has the answer. So this is the concern where uh, the script hidden from the tribunal's view can be given to the witness. Of course, we expect every party to maintain the sanctity of the process. But technologically speaking, we can have 360-degree view camera on multiple camera angles to ensure that the witness is not being coached off the camera, and or at least have one other person in physical presence who can monitor the witness. So those are the smaller things, but it can play a major role to ensure that the fair and transparent process is followed during the arbitration process. So therefore, virtual hearings are very important to take care of all these smaller aspects. If you talk about the role of Indian arbitral institutions, number of Indian arbitration institutions have kept up to speed with the virtual hearings. For example, Nani Palkhiwala Arbitration Center rules, Rule 19A, provides that the tribunal may conduct the arbitration in such manner as is considered appropriate, provides the parties and given equal opportunity to present its case at all stages. Now, if you talk about Mumbai Center for International Arbitration, Rule 14.5 again provide that the emergency arbitrator may conduct proceedings by telephone or video conference, and Rule 21.1 provides that the tribunal may conduct the arbitration in such manner as it's considered appropriate to ensure the avoidance of unnecessarily delay and expense, provided that such procedure ensure fair and equal treatment of the parties and afford them a reasonable opportunity to present their case. So this is something again very similar to rules like SIAC, where they don't talk about the video conferencing or virtual hearings, but they give enough powers to arbitrators to conduct the arbitration as in the manner as they feel comfortable and appropriate to ensure delay, avoidance of any delay and expense. As far as Delhi International Arbitration Center is concerned, again it provides that the tribunal may conduct the arbitration in such manner as it considers appropriate, provided that such procedures ensure fair and equal treatment between the parties and afford them a reasonable opportunity to present their case. So these are the rules which they don't talk about virtual hearings specifically other than for emergency arbitrator, but they give enough leeway to the tribunal and the parties to agree for virtual hearing as they go along. IAF is an Indian arbitration forum. This is, if anybody who is interested in arbitration or specializing into arbitration field, they should consider being part of IAF, because it's an organization which is aimed at creating a bar or arbitration bar, or the members of arbitration fraternity who are interested in arbitration. The whole purpose of this particular organization or a group of people, if we may say so, is to promote arbitration in India, give the platform to younger arbitrators to get trained in the arbitration process and come up with the guidelines and or we can say soft law to support the arbitration process. So IAF has come up with the guidelines and now we have updated it in version 2, which has been recently launched. And what IAF has done, and I being part of the IAF, I can say what we have done is to have continuity in the arbitration proceedings, and also restricting the physical hearings and promoting virtual hearings. So what IAF has said that the first preference should be given to the video conferencing or teleconferencing to save time and cost. Video conferencing of witness may be allowed if the witness is unable to be present at a particular hearing, and discretion would be entirely with the tribunal to hold the hearing by video or teleconferencing to save time and cost. This particular rule of the guidelines gives the discretion to the tribunal and takes away that from the parties, because if the parties have adopted the IAF guidelines as a part of the procedural rules, then it gives the benefit to the tribunal to rely upon this particular rule 31.1 to decide whether the hearing should be held physically or through video conferencing. The whole idea is to save time and cost, because if we consider the travel time, the travel cost, and apart from the other cost, the virtual hearing can prove to be a real saving for the time and cost which we are normally used to see in the arbitration hearings, having even sometimes the cost is as good as the main claim, and it becomes challenging to explain the users of arbitrators or the clients to say that why can't we reduce the cost, because there is a cost of the arbitrators, the counsels, the witnesses, the experts, the arbitral institutions. And if we can all have the hearings through video conferencing, that physical hearing cost can be saved to a great extent. Now, apart from that, I wanted to discuss with you a very important tool of augmented reality or virtual reality or graphical representation of the evidence. Now, when we talk of augmented reality, what is AR? The augmented reality is a digital tool that superimposes a 3D image on a subject's vision of the real world and creates a composite view. So you can have a image which can be superimposed on this thing. So this can be a very well way to present a evidence. For example, in oil and gas arbitration, we need to know exactly what happened at the rig or what happened. So we were doing one arbitration where the well had to be plugged, and we had to explain how the plugging of the well has to happen by pouring the concrete from the top, or digging the well on a horizontal. When you hit a hard rock, you can't go below a particular depth, but as per your production sharing contract, you have to drill the well to a particular level, and if you don't, then your minimum work program doesn't get achieved. So all this kind of evidence can be again with the virtual hearing or the use of the technology can be used by telling the tribunal exactly how it could have happened or it did not happen, and that can be a great tool to present the evidence before the tribunal. And sometimes we have seen that happening in a real arbitrations, the physical arbitrations, and also through the video conferencing, we can use this technology to show the arbitrators how actually the subject matter of the arbitration. For example, it could be anything. We did one arbitration involving a fast food chain, and the tribunal wanted to go and see how the processes work there, and we showed the video, and we can really help the tribunal to understand the subject matter of arbitration in a real sense, if as if they have been part of the process. So if you see now, you can see on the screen is that you can see the components of the car and what all are made out of it without even seeing this. So in a complex technological arbitration or a construction arbitration. So one arbitration which we did was for construction of a tunnel for a railway bridge, and it was very difficult for tribunal to understand then what was the problem and what was the deficiency by a contractor, which the contractor did not do. Fortunately, we had some of the technical members who were the arbitrators, and engineers who are the arbitrators, who could explain the non-technical arbitrator who are from the judicial background. But if you have an augmented reality, and if you can present the whole process in front of the arbitrator, they can really appreciate. And sometimes we as lawyers also have to understand, to argue the case effectively, what are the technological or technical aspect of the matter. And when we sit as an arbitrator also, it is a duty of the arbitrator to understand the facts fully before they can come to the conclusion on who is right and who is wrong. So this technology can be a great help to explain the tribunal the factual aspect of the matter. And we have seen in practice how best it can be used, and it's for all of us to make use of it with the permission of the tribunal. Of course, we have to give an opportunity to the other side to rebut this evidence with their own technological aspects or technical aspects, which is obviously should be given as a matter of right. When we talk of virtual reality or technology, we can also talk of a digital tool that artificially stimulates an interactive environment that replaces the subject's view of the real world. So here, virtual reality is that you wear a kind of a screen on your eyes where you can, even if you are sitting at one place, you can feel as if you are part of a place which you are looking at. So this is again a very important tool for arbitrators to understand the actual place. So even if sitting in one room, you can feel that there are technologies where you can feel that you are sitting in a room in front of the people, and that is what happens when you are trying to present an evidence, or you are trying to have a hearing, which is although virtual, but you can feel that it's a real. So when you are wearing the screen, or you're looking at the screen, you can see the other people also sitting in front of you, or you can be at the place where you are not. So virtual reality again is, as you see from saw from the Queen Mary survey, not being used that frequently in arbitration, but this is something which has a potential of being used for the arbitration in future time. So that what happens is that if everything is virtual, then you don't have to go anywhere, but you can still feel as if you are a part of the hearing, where everybody is present in the same room. And that is a great advantage we can see that parties can have through this technology, is that without traveling, or without going anywhere, they can be part of the hearing where everybody is present in the same room. Or at least you can have the site inspection where you can see exactly how the things are done, not on a video but on a real sense. So this is a thing of future, but definitely it's a very, very important tool for presenting to the tribunal or conducting the hearing as we go along. So if you talk about the technology, it has innumerable uses in education, entertainment, health, emergency management, public works, and tourism sectors. So these are the sectors which are already using AR and VR technology, but not that much used in the arbitration. But as I said, there is a tremendous potential for it being used for the arbitration process itself. AR tools are used to analyze the internal components of a gadget, product, or a structure, and this can be of aid while explaining technical aspects to the arbitrators. In the arbitration proceedings, VR technology can also help to remotely visualize how a far-off location actually appears. So as I said, even in oil and gas arbitration or in any other arbitration, you want to see the actual place where the dispute arose. That can help the tribunal to get the sense of being there without going to the place of the dispute. In future, as I said, the arbitral hearings can also happen through holographic participation of the lawyers and arbitrator from various geographical locations. So if you have these technologies, you can be at a different geographical location, but can be having a feel of the physical hearing. The last topic for today is data security, because data security is something which is paramount for the arbitration processes, for confidentiality, and also for the parties to ensure that none of their information is misused, even during or after the arbitration processes. When we talk of ICC protocol on virtual hearings, it specifically deals with data protection and data security. What it provides is that any virtual hearing that requires a consultation between the tribunal and parties with the aim of implementing measures, it's called often cyber protocol, sufficient to comply with any applicable data privacy regulations. So if you have a data protection law, although in India, we don't have a specific law dealing with data protection, but we have Information Technology Act, which provides for certain principles of data protections. And what we have is that any sensitive information or sensitive personal information should not be collected, stored, or shared without the permission of the data subjects. If I am putting certain information, it's a confidential information. Now, right to privacy has been a fundamental right recognized by the Supreme Court under Article 21 of the Constitution. And at the same time, the commercial confidence is something which is very important. So sometimes we don't produce documents which has the formula or it has the commercial confidence, maybe the cost or the profit which we are making at the time of entering into the contract. Those information is kept confidential by the tribunal, and even if it is shared, it should not be misused. Especially in virtual hearings, there should be a cyber protocol which should be entered and agreed between the parties before they start with the virtual hearings on because of the data privacy rules. And also such measures should deal with the privacy of the hearing and the protection of the confidentiality and electronic communication within the arbitration proceedings and any electronic document platform. So not only the parties to the arbitration, but these things should also be applicable to the platform being used for this particular hearing. Data security, ICA, New York Bar, and CPI Cyber Security Protocol has recently come for international commercial arbitration. What it has is that there are principles which are there, which are laid down for data security, and it provides that the specific information security measures should be applied in the arbitration consideration, considering the various categories. For example, asset management, access controls, encryption and communication security, physical environment security, operation security, and information and security incident management. So all these aspects should be taken care of in the arbitration, because ultimately there are 14 principles which have been formulated by this protocol. And if you see the first principle, it says that the framework to guide the tribunal and the parties for administering the institutions, the consideration of what information security measures are reasonable to apply in a particular arbitration matter. The second principle is that each party, arbitrator and administering institution should consider the baseline information security practices that are necessary for their conduct of arbitration. The third principle which they have come up with, that the parties, arbitrators and administering institution should ensure that all persons directly or indirectly involved in an arbitration or on their behalf are aware of and follow any information security measures adopted in a proceedings as well as the potential impact of their security incident. So these are the standards which have to be maintained. And apart from that, the information security measures adopted for the arbitration should be those that are reasonable in the circumstances of the case that are considered. Now, what are this consideration is that to determine this, they have to also decide what is the information is getting exchanged, what is necessary for transmission of the arbitration relation information, where the storage is taking place. Is it stored in a server which is having an encryption facility, and whether you have the password to break into it, and who will get an access to the password. Travel, so if you are traveling, what kind of security you should have, would you download it in your personal gadgets, all this information relating to arbitration and use it. Hearing and conferences, where when you are having a hearing, what kind of security measures you would maintain, all these are necessary to be decided uh, as a part of the process, and there is this protocol is really helpful for that. The most important is post arbitration, and if you lose, how much information you would disclose after the arbitration which you have gathered for the arbitration purpose. Of course, the confidentiality obligation continues even beyond the arbitration hearing and the arbitration process, but something which is online, how much you can protect is also very important, and this protocol deals with it. Now, what are the other considerations which has to be used? For example, if you are using a platform that are password protected, so they should be having an access control. So people should get the permission before they are added to the virtual hearings. And if at all you are having a data platform which is there to store all the information online, and there are a number of data centers which are providing these services. If we talk about the data, online data security service providers, there are a number of such uh, processing is there, where they can provide the entire arbitration ecosystem online. And if you are using those, you should be using those things which are password protected, and only the authorized people who get an access of that. If the internet connections are being used, it should again be password protected. The public Wi-Fi should not be used for arbitration hearings. Ultimately, anybody who has the password can hack into the whole hearing process, which is quite dangerous, and it should be avoided. Always, for any virtual hearing, a host should be nominated. Maybe there could be co-host by both the parties who can control the entry of the participants. So nobody who is not allowed by the host should be able to enter the arbitration hearing without the permission of the host, and the host should be responsible person who ensures that only the persons who are authorized to attend the hearing should be able to attend, or even during the process of arbitration, nobody should come in who is not related to the proceedings. The next one is avoiding the using of the information that would disclose the identity of the parties in the meeting description. So it should be that if you are giving a name, you should give the name of the party who are you representing, and there should not be any other information which should be disclosing the identity of the parties in the meeting description. So if you are hosting this thing, that the name of the party should be should not be mentioned in the information which goes to the third party service provider. It could be a name which is anonymous, or a party's counsel's name can be used. So name, to protect the name of the parties also is very important, so that anybody who wants to get into this particular hearing is not able to identify which meeting to hack into. Because if the parties' names are not disclosed, it would be very difficult to identify where to breach the security. Of course, these are the concerns, and they're real and genuine concerns, but we have not seen that thing happening because the use of video conferencing has been very, very limited so far. But these are the things to be kept in mind for the future, because more and more we use, the vulnerability of video conferencing can be misused, or it could be there to breach the data security. As far as the awareness of the terms of service that apply to the platform, recording features and other things, it should be disabled. If at all the recording is there, you should be able to inform parties that they are going to record and how it is to be used, how it is to be stored, because hearing may have so much of confidential information that the storage of that electronic information can be a threat to the future of the business of the parties. And therefore, it should be made absolutely clear by disabling those functions, or at least if there is an automatic recording, the party should be aware of the terms of use by various service providers. And that's where the secure platforms are most useful, or it should be encouraged, because there are a number of platforms which are end-to-end encrypted, and only the parties who are exchanging the videos or messages can have access to that. Even the platform who is providing the service will not have the access. So therefore, it is very important for the parties to agree to the platform or use the platform that are providing this kind of services, who are secure and who are stable, and provides the multiple use of sharing of the screen, or having multiple screens where you can see the document and the witnesses. Those platforms or which are tailor-made for the arbitration is bound to come, which are secure, and the parties can use them with peace of mind. Ultimately, that's the future of arbitration, and we should all be ready to go with that mindset, is that we can change the way we do arbitrations with the help of technology and minimize the risks which are posed by the technology to conduct the arbitration in most fair, efficient, transparent way, and in a most secure this thing. So if the recordings are getting shared, the file transfer should be secure and password protected, and the storage also should be password protected. So that is something has to be kept in mind for virtual hearings. And if it is recorded, then how to store the recording is also extremely important. Prohibition of any audio, video, or screenshot recording by any party other than the official record should be permissible, because, as I said, if you allow anybody to record it, it can be misused or used against the interest of the parties who are involved in the arbitration process. So with that, I think we can reduce a lot of data security concerns if we are careful and we ensure that the parties are able to conduct their arbitration in a most efficient way. That kind of ends my presentation for today. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer. We have a question answer session now. So any doubt, any issue you want to understand, or I want me to explain in a better way, I'd be happy to answer the question. So we have some time for question, and I would request Arvi to ask the questions. Thank you.
Thank you for the insightful lecture for us, and I will be putting questions. The first question is, would it be a ground to set aside an award if the tribunal compels either of the parties to present its case virtually under equal opportunity to present the case?
Correct. So that's a very good question, and I faced this similar issue in an arbitration where we wanted tribunal to force parties to conduct the hearing through video conference, but the tribunal refused, saying that, look, I cannot force parties. But in the question you're asking that if they're forcing, what is the fate of the award? Because if the award can be set aside on that ground. And again, it really is a question of fact, because under Section 18, if an equal opportunity was given and it can be proved that both parties had an opportunity to uh, present their case to video conferencing without any difficulty, uh, just because of non-agreement between the parties, in my view, cannot be the ground that they were not given equal opportunity. In other words, if the parties were given opportunity to present the case fully and they had an ability to do so, but they refused to do it voluntarily, that cannot be the ground for setting aside of the award. But again, as I said, the tribunals are quite cautious, and they adopt a conservative approach by not forcing the parties. So up till now, we have done only virtual hearings where both parties have agreed, or the tribunal has been able to convince. So we have had situations where one party refuses, and then we have the hearing to discuss whether to have the virtual hearing or not through audio conference. And then after a lot of push from tribunal, we have seen parties reluctantly agreeing. The main reason they say, our senior counsel is in a different jurisdiction, we are in different jurisdiction, my witness is not with me, it's very difficult to prepare the counsels through video conference, and those kind of reasons are given. And after a lot of discussion, sometimes parties agree and sometimes they don't. If they don't, we don't push them, because for the very reason which you asked, is there any ground for challenge? Yes, there is a ground for challenge under Section 34 of the Indian Arbitration Act, which allows the court to set aside the award if the procedure was not as per the agreement between the parties, or the parties were not able to present their case. And therefore, to avoid any such risk, we are not forcing parties. But in my view, if the parties have agreed to an institutional rules or any set of guidelines which gives power to the tribunal to agree on a video conferencing, then I would say it's an agreement by reference, or and therefore parties can be forced to go for hearing with video conference. And in those circumstances, although it's not tested as of now, but I'm very hopeful that the court should not set aside the award if the parties have agreed by agreeing to the rules which provide for video conferencing, or gives power, those rules giving power to the tribunal to decide whether to hold hearing through video conferencing or not. For example, IAF guidelines gives power to the tribunal to decide whether to hold the hearing through video conference or not. And if that is the case, then and if parties have agreed to that at the very first hearing, then they cannot, at the end of the final hearing or the beginning of the final hearing, they cannot refuse to go for video conferencing. And if they lose, challenge the award on that ground.
The second question is, what is the confidentiality of virtual apps which are used in arbitration?
Again, that's the big question mark, because all these apps are not tailored for arbitration hearings. We are using these apps which are already there for other purposes, for video conferencing and for meetings or conferences, but we are using them for arbitration. Now, as far as confidentiality is concerned, we cannot guarantee, because if you see the terms of use of or the privacy policy of each of these apps, they have a very wide language, and that wide language can be used to defend any leak of information. Although I don't think that any of these apps may be interested in any particular hearing or anybody, but if there is anybody who has an access to this particular app or this thing, and they want to misuse the information, and in real world we have not come across such kind of a situation so far, but there is a potential of it getting misused. And therefore all these apps have a very wide ability to collect data, store data, and provide the services for that. Again, as I said, India doesn't have a data protection law. We have the bill which is pending with the parliament, which was based on Justice Sri Krishna committee report. And once the law comes in, again, all this situation will change, where we will have to do it. But the best way is for the arbitral institutions to provide their own technological platform, which is secure, and nobody has any ability to get into the whole system. And that is something is a future, or I say it's a very near future, where we should be able to develop those platforms where we are not relying on these other apps which are getting used. For example, there are some apps which are end-to-end encryption. Zoom has now started end-to-end encryption. BlueJeans again is an encrypted platform. We have Microsoft Teams. We have WebEx. The courts are using, Delhi High Court is using WebEx. Supreme Court is using app called Video. And all these apps are based out of India, outside India, and it's very difficult to say with confidence that all the data which is exchanged on for an arbitration purpose, because they're not tailor-made for an arbitration, can be 100% secure. But of course, they have the security measures, and if we disable many functions, I'm sure we can develop a system which can be used for arbitration securely. But the way I see it is that we should have the platform which is designed for arbitration hearings and which is more secure. So that's something we should plan and develop and use in coming times.
Fourth question. What can be done if the intermediary is a competitor of arbitrating parties?
See, as far as the intermediary is concerned, if it is arbitrating party and the intermediary are competing, then the best way is to avoid using that platform, because ultimately there are a number of platforms who are providing the similar kind of services. So if you are having a confidentiality issue or a conflict of interest issue, conflict in any form in arbitration made, and the whole idea of independence and conflict is that even though there is no real conflict, there is a potential of conflict, or an apprehension of conflict that should be avoided, because what it does is it vitiates the entire arbitration process, and ultimately the arbitration is as good as the process. So if the process is not followed properly, or the situation is are created where you can doubt the process of competition, or conflict, or breach of confidentiality, that should be avoided, and ultimately it's better to not use the platform of an intermediary which may have some interest or a conflict with the arbitrating party. So ultimately it's always good to go to neutral platform, and as I said, there should not be anybody who is providing this platform other than the arbitral institutions. And arbitral institutions are in a way most equipped and neutral to provide these services, and technologically that's possible, and I think that's the best way forward, so that there is no such issue with regard to the technological problems, or having a situation where the intermediary is competing with the arbitrating party.
Another question. But a non-corporative defendant may not agree for virtual hearing. How to tackle the situation?
Yeah, that's a practical difficulty, because if you are having an individual party, or the party who is not sophisticated, and they are not able to present the case, and that's where the institutional arbitration is a great tool, because if the party doesn't have the ability, the institution can provide the support. Or many a times what has happened is that we have tried to provide the support to parties technologically, because in a way, if you see non-corporate party, for a physical hearing to hold, it's very expensive. Now if you talk about a technological virtual hearing, it's very good for them, because they're saving time and cost. They may not be equipped, but that is something can be learned very easily. These technologies are very user friendly. They don't take time individual or anybody who is using the arbitration. It's a very good tool for parties to conduct the hearings, and ultimately it's a discretion of the parties. As I said, unless and until parties have pre-agreed for video conferencing at the stage of hearing, parties may not be forced. And if they are not agreeing, unfortunately, the hearing cannot happen through virtual hearings. But if they can be convinced about the advantages and the ease of the use of the technology, I'm very confident that even the non-corporate parties can also be persuaded to agree to the use of video conferencing. And ultimately, once they use it, they will become comfortable. But yes, if they want to delay it, and that's the reason why they are not agreeing, then nothing much can be done apart from putting some pressure or convincing them that it is in their advantage. But yes, if there is a fixed timeline which has been agreed by the parties, and there is no way physical hearing can take place, then the arbitrator should also pass some kind of an order where they can be forced to agree to video conferencing. But as of now, as I earlier said, tribunals are not passing such orders which are forcing parties for video conferencing, and simply adjourning the hearing to a convenient date where they can hold the physical hearing. But it's not in the interest of the parties, because many a times we have had situations where the physical hearings have happened, and the next hearing takes place after 5 or 6 months, and we have to re-argue the whole case virtually, because either the tribunal has forgotten or it's no continuity remains. So it's always good to start and finish the arbitration at one go rather than splitting it in such a long time. So it's in the interest of the parties to go on with the virtual hearing, and it's good to make them agree. But if they can't, then in certain circumstances, tribunal is bound to continue with the adjournment and not force the party to have the video conferencing.
The question, in an arbitration already on, the procedural order says that the future hearing will be conducted virtually and none of the parties object. Can it be considered as consent of the parties?
Yes, because if the procedural order says so, and the parties do not respond or they do not object within a reasonable time, then it would be treated as a consent of the parties. Ideally, it is always good as a matter of procedure for the tribunal to ask or invite the parties for their comments before passing the procedural order. And we have seen in practice that always the parties are given opportunity to comment before the award order is passed, procedural order is passed, so that the comments and objections are taken into consideration by the tribunal prior to passing of the procedural order. But in case the tribunal decides to go on with passing of the procedural order and the parties keep silence or they do not comment or object, then it could be a tacit consent, and then party should cannot be said that, look, I never gave a consent. But keeping silence itself when you have received the procedural order, or continuing with the virtual hearing after in view of that procedural order, could be sufficient enough to have an implicit consent or a tacit consent of the to continue with the video conference. And therefore I don't see that party can subsequently object that a fair or due opportunity was not given to the party. So the answer is yes, it would be a consent if they don't object to such a procedural order.
Another question, sir. How many virtual arbitration have you conducted? Someone is interested in knowing so far.
Yeah, so as a firm, we have conducted number of virtual hearings by now. Apart virtual full virtual hearing before COVID, we have conducted around 3 to 4, but we have conducted a lot of hearings through video conferencing where we are at one location and the witness is at other location. So those are number of those such cases. After lockdown, by now we have conducted 6 full hearings and around 7 to 8 procedural hearings. We have now this month we have lined up number of hearings back to back for online virtual hearings for full day trials. So we will start at 11 and finish at 5, of course, with a lunch break in between. But from July, August, we have number of hearings which are lined up. Of course, it's slowed down in March and April, end of March and April, although all the hearings which were fixed in the March and April were physical hearings and which got cancelled. But from May onwards, we have started all the hearings virtual, and it's going very, very successfully. And without any difficulty, we have been able to conduct the hearings, which are as good as physical hearings, if I can say, and sometimes better, because you don't talk other things other than the hearings, and you are able to finish a lot of arguments in a short period of time, where otherwise we used to lose a lot of time in other discussions or unnecessary arguments. But from our personal experience, it has been a great change and for good that we are able to do this hearing through virtual. And in fact, in courts also we are doing, like yesterday I argued section 9 application for 5 hours. It started, of course, there was a lunch break of 45 minutes in between, but it was a very interesting matter where a tender was given for solar power, and the dispute arose between the parties, and we argued entire interim relief application before Delhi High Court virtually, and it was seamless, completely seamless, very effective, and the judge also dictated the order online. We could hear it, and it was disposed of. So not only for the arbitration hearings, but also for the court hearings, we are able to use the video conferencing very, very effectively. And I think all of us, we should now use it irrespective of the situation we are in now. This tool has to be always be kept as a practical tool to save time and cost in arbitration.
These were the questions. So we have come to an end of the session, and I guess these were the limited questions that people have raised. But thank you so much, sir, because this was really an insightful session. We came to know the technicalities involved in virtual hearing, and definitely the future is going to be what is the new normal right now. And soon we will find that more and more platform would come from the institution side rather than being an intermediary. So thank you so much. And I would also like to thank all the participants for being so humble and being patient with the entire lecture. So thank you. And I guess there is some network issue from my side, so I apologize for that, but we can't help it. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for your patience, and hope to see you for the next session due at the same time, scheduled at 3 p.m. So please don't be late. Thank you, sir. And thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you. Bye.
So you need to disconnect. I'm no longer the host. Something went wrong. So that is why
Yeah.
so you need to
Bye.
disconnect.